Welcome to Paranormal Heart, a place where people can talk about their paranormal experiences. With your host, Kat Ward.
Welcome back, folks, to Paranormal Heart's first episode for the year 2022. I hope your new year is going well so far. Here in Ontario, COVID is on the rise again. We've had record-breaking cases, and with that, we've gone back to stage 2. And that means schools are done virtually, restaurants, bars, and gyms are closed, and essential businesses can only have about 50% max capacity. So people, we're all so very tired of this. I just want to say, wherever you are listening from, please be patient with cashiers, other employees, patrons. Just be kind and hang in there. This will all be over. I'm not sure when, but it will be over. And I just want to give a special shout out to all of you amazing first responders. I know you're also very tired, exhausted. We really appreciate you. Much love to everyone listening to this. I have a great episode for you tonight. I'm joined once again by a longtime friend, the crypto guru himself, Ronald Murphy. We'll be talking about my favorite cryptid genus, Lycanthropes. That's Werewolves, Loup Garou, and Dogman. We also touch on other topics as well. If you'd like to be a guest of the show, or have questions, comments, or just want to say hello, drop me an email at paranormalheart13@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the show. Whew, that was a little tongue twister, wasn't it? You can find me on YouTube, Podbean, FringeRadioNetwork.com, or any place you find fine podcast. Now, on with the show and my special guest, Ronald Murphy. Hello, Ron. Welcome back to Paranormal Heart.
It's been a while, ma'am. I was expecting you to get in touch with me sooner because I so love to be on your program. But if I'm not mistaken, now, is this correct? Am I the first person to be on your show in 2022? Is that true?
You are the first guest of 2022. That's right.
Well, I will accept that honor, and then apologies are accepted at this point as well. So I do like talking with you. I think that you have a great stance on the way people look at the paranormal, and you think outside of the proverbial box, and I'm happy to be on your show anytime you ask me.
Thank you. Yeah, there's a bunch of people, yourself, Brian Bowden, and Al Santoriga. And there's so many others too, but I just love having you guys on. It's like your family.
It is. It does. It feels like we're talking to a family member, and I think that's what a lot of people like about your show too, especially the listeners, is that they can kind of sit back and feel like they're in the living room listening to us chat.
Yeah, I've been told that, and it makes me feel really good knowing that, because that's pretty much what I'm going to, or going for, because I like for people to be able to listen to the topics and everything, but it's just like we're sitting in, I think you had mentioned this before, the virtual living room, having a beer, chatting about the paranormal.
Yeah, I think that that's the way we should do things, because if you listen to a lot of talk shows out there, it's almost exclusatory. It's almost like, it's kind of an inside club and you're kind of eavesdropping. I prefer this way. I prefer to be much more organic and much more friendly to everybody listening. We're all invited here. We all have a stance. We all have our own opinion, and we have our outlook. And it's these kind of, taking in all this kind of stuff, the Gestalt aspect of the paranormal, taking it and treating it holistically is really, what I enjoy so much about it. I don't want to be in one particular camp and see this very strange world of ours just through one perspective. I like to look at it through multidisciplinary perspectives.
Exactly. When people say there's two sides to the coin, I say no. Actually, there's three, because you got the edge as well.
You have the edges, and yep. What we're dealing with too. We might be dealing with virtual coins, and all other kind of things going on there as well too.
Yeah. So different perspectives of looking at the paranormal, and we don't necessarily have to agree. I just want to have a safe place for everyone to talk about it, and that's what I like about my guests.
Well, that's the whole thing. I think what you have, especially in this day and age, is you have got this idea of celebrity involved with the paranormal. And people often think that those folks who are on TV are the experts in the field.
Mm.
Yeah, when in actuality there are no experts in this field. They either look good, or they're a great talking head, or they know somebody in the business, and it's through networking. But those people that we kind of bow down to, whether they're looking for ghosts or cryptids, they had a break in life to become these paracelebs. But they really, and again, like I said, there is no experts in this field. We're all, a part of a very ambiguous type of endeavor. We don't know where this rabbit hole leads, if it leads anywhere at all. This might be one of those multiverse things where you flip the coin, and 500 of the same coins are being flipped in other dimensions as well too. So I like to keep my eyes open and my ears open and look at it from all aspects. Being skeptical, of course, but never being closed-minded.
Exactly. Yeah, I like to have people of every type of background. I don't care if a person is a celebrity in the paranormal world, or if it's just the regular person, like the cashier down the road at my grocery store. I just want to hear everyone's stories, and I don't care, like I said, if they're a celebrity or not. I want to hear the stories so everybody else can relate to it as well.
Sure. And there has to be relatability, which is, and again, like I said, it feels like we're all sitting together in a living room, and we have our feet propped up, and somebody's drinking a coffee in the corner, and somebody has a nice tea, and somebody has a brandy, and we're all sitting there kind of enjoying ourselves around a warm fire on this, this bleak midwinter that we're facing right now. And, we're just asking and answering the questions that are posed to us, and see if we can kind of connect the dots.
Yeah, brainstorming. And I'll be sitting in the corner with my Kraken spiced rum.
You know what? Yeah, I've heard a lot about it. You're a fan of that, right? That's your go-to.
Yeah, I love spiced rum. Kraken is probably one of my favorites. That one. And when we were living in Alberta, it used to be called Price Club, Costco. They actually have liquor stores in Alberta at the Costco. I couldn't believe it, because we don't have it anywhere else in Canada. And they make the best spiced rum. So it's Kirkland, I think it is. So yeah.
Well, I don't drink, and it's a kind of a shame sometimes, because people, I can't relate to what people are talking about, but I think that if I were to drink anything, it would have the name Kraken in it, because I do like that very much. So maybe one day down the line, I'll try to imbibe a little bit and see if I will be able to take it. But yeah, I never caught on to it, even as in college or anything. I never got into the party scene, and I besides a beer, I've never really drank much of anything.
Oh wow. Good for you.
Yeah, I know, that's what they say.
Well, I'm having you here to talk about my favorite cryptid genus, I guess you could say, the Lycanthropes. And that could be werewolves. Loup Garou is my favorite. Dogman. Any other lichens that you can think of that we'd like to discuss? The floor is yours.
Well, see, and this is my favorite as well too, and not only a cryptid, but I like to deal in the abstract of archetypes, and this is my favorite archetype out there. Going back to Carl Jung, who I really have been impressed by and has really influenced a lot of my work. He believed in the idea of this collective unconscious that we all share, and in that collective unconscious, there's these little nightmares that affect the human race around the world, across space and time. And, they're the archetypes, that we have. There's archetypes for other things, but there's also archetypical nightmare beings as well, too, of which the werewolf is definitely one of them. So in my research, I've always been enamored by the werewolf. As a kid, it was my favorite monster movie. Going back to the Lon Chaney,
Yes.
the very poorly transformation on film, where slowly he gets covered in hair and he goes out into the moors and tracking down grave diggers and things like that. I've always liked this monster very much because it's so human. It is one of us, and that great saying that was written by a Hollywood producer, that even a man that says his prayers by night can still change into an animal, still become this monster. And that has always fascinated me. And I think that that's what the werewolf represents. The werewolf represents the idea, the notion, the horrifying, chilling reminder that humanity is capable of fantastic and great goodness. But at the same time, in the idea of structuralism, this idea of goodness is also mired down by the inconceivable heinous activities that a human being can produce as well too. So you talked about the coin at the very beginning, the analogy of the coin, and I think that that's what the werewolf represents as well too. It is the tell of our human coin, if you will, and it represents everything that we are capable of doing, but we don't like to admit that we're capable of doing it. And so doing, we then give it a name of a werewolf and we make it a monster, and it's a little bit easier to deal with. But at the end of the day, it's like a great episode of Scooby-Doo. We have the werewolf cornered, we have it right where we want it. We have our sights set on him, and we go up and we pull off the mask, and almost invariably there's a human being underneath that mask.
So true. And I've seen in a lot of movies too, the past 10 years or so, that they say, like monster movies, they actually call humans probably the worst monster there is out there compared to, the other, werewolves or vampires or whatever's out there, that they say that we are actually the worst monster. But I guess we can be.
Right. Well, going back to the idea of Carl Jung as well, too, like I said, we don't want to admit what we're capable of being because we are, as Shakespeare said, a little less than angels. We are a great species who have produced amazing works of art and literature. We are. I'm astounded a lot by what we've been able to do in our time here on planet Earth. But at the same time, Carl Jung said, within every person, residing deep down inside, places that we don't like to visit, places that we don't like to admit that is a part of us. In that realm dwells the shadow. Mm-hmm. And in that shadow is a mirror. And in that mirror, we see our reflections. So the things that scare us the most, the things that sicken and frighten us the most, the things that are so repulsive to us, that means something to us. That is the mirror in which we're looking into, and that's the reflection that we see. And as a researcher, I really want to get to that kind of bottom line of why we are so repulsed by these things, by these archetypes. And it truly is. I mean, I like to go out into the woods and pound on trees and look for tracks and do investigations. Of course I do. I mean, that's just a part of who I am. That's the adventurous part of cryptozoology. But really my favorite part is mulling over old books and looking at literary accounts and reading eyewitness reports 500-600 years ago of what people would have deemed to be werewolves, because they've been a part of us for so long, and even looking into the reading between the lines and looking into the scant archaeological evidence that we have concerning werewolves. And by doing that, we can shed a little bit more light on this archetype of what we call the lycanthrope.
I really liked what you had mentioned about the coin earlier. I know we discussed that, and I think that was before we recorded. Just to let the listeners know, we're talking about the coin, where you say there's two sides to a coin, two sides to every story. But when you look at the coin, there's really three sides that I see. You have the edge as well. So that's just a way for me to say, be open-minded, and there's always a different version out there other than the two stories that you know of. There's going to be more. And like you said, if you flip one coin, who knows that in the metaverse there's not another 500 coins being flipped as well.
That's right, absolutely. And these are the kind of conundrums that were facing our ancestors as well, too. Whenever we talk about werewolves, I'm sure the younger population has been introduced to the werewolf probably through the Twilight series. Whenever you have a buff teenager that transforms into a wolf and off he goes and everything like that. But really, that is not part of the werewolf lineage. That might be an offshoot or a strain or a bastard cousin of the werewolf legend. But really, being a werewolf was something that you really did not want to be. It was something to be feared. And not only was werewolfism something to be feared, in order to become one, especially whenever you come into the Middle Ages, into the Renaissance, it almost had to be forged with a pact with Satan himself in order to be imbued with these kind of powers. So the vernacular of the werewolf has changed greatly, considering what society that we're talking about. And then whenever we get into the Judeo-Christian aspect of werewolves, now they become agents of evil, and now we have the good chasing down and hunting down the evil that preys upon the unwary. Really fascinating stuff whenever you think about it, And before we had the name werewolf, we had the name of Theranthropes, in the archaeological record, should I say. I mean, the werewolf goes back further, but before people had the idea of lycanthropes, we had the idea that human beings were indeed able to transform into animals. We can see this on cave paintings in France and elsewhere, where presumably the shaman is able to assume the form of various animals such as hyenas and bears and deer. And that probably comes from about, some sort of sympathetic magic. They are assuming some sort of prey animal, or they're assuming that animal spirit in order to divulge some sort of mysteries to this very mundane world around us. We're trying to find answers, always trying to find answers. So, like I said, we could go to the cave paintings and see human beings transforming into animals. But it's not until we get to the Greeks who actually give us the name of the lycanthrope, and that is from King Lycaon. Who was the king of Arcadia, which is a backwoods place. Whenever we think of places like Athens and Sparta and all these great city-states, we also have places that were rather obscure. The birthplace of Alexander the Great, Macedon, was considered one of these very fringe areas, but Arcadia was one of these places that was a little bit more rustic than most, and it was a place of great superstition. It was kind of like their version of Transylvania, but it was out of this milieu, it was out of this culture in which the werewolf took its form, where the transformation into the lycanthrope finally comes to us. And in one of the tales told to us, the king decided that he would test the omniscience of Zeus, the supreme god, and he killed one of his children, and he served the god his son as an offering. Now, it's obscure to think why this would happen. It's very convoluted, so we really have to kind of peel back the different layers of this onion to get to the very core of what's going on. In this tale was probably ideas of former cults that involved human sacrifice. It probably is very ancient. By the time it comes to our tradition, it was probably part of the oral tradition for maybe 500 to 1,000 years, if not longer. So in places like Arcadia, there were probably definitely traditions where human sacrifices to the gods took place. And, the other more cultured areas around that particular center would have found these very vile and disgusting the more they evolved, and hence that Arcadia was seen as a place where very strange things took place. So I think this was a vestige to the remembrance of human sacrifices to the gods, and the King Lycaon probably was trying to show his pleasure of having the god Zeus at his table by sacrificing one of his sons, and sons were very important in the agricultural cultures around the globe. So I think that's where we really have the kernel of truth of what's going on here. But as it comes down to us, Zeus no longer would accept this human sacrifice, and was disgusted and repulsed by being served human food, or human being to eat. So one version of the tale, that he actually resurrects the son that Lycaon had killed, and then in his rage, Zeus transforms Lycaon into a wolf, because a wolf is something that would, without any kind of remorse, prey upon a human being. So we have this tale, going back, at least 2,000 to 3,000 years, in part of the oral tradition that probably goes back farther into the deep recesses of Greek history, to find the very first incidents of the lycanthrope, and that's where we get the name from, Lycaon, lycanthrope, and there you have it.
Now, if memory serves, I could be thinking of something else, but I think Zeus had cursed the king and his sons.
His sons, yeah. In several versions, that is indeed the case.
Okay.
And again, because it comes to us, and who's telling the story, whether it's Hesiod or later on, we do have some Roman writers that are revising some of these Greek, like Ovid, was one of these great Roman writers that would actually revise some of the Roman myths and legends. But yeah, so it depends upon which particular myth you're looking at, which particular resource you're looking at. But it could have been his sons as well too. Either way you look at it, what we are dealing with is that the use of human sacrifices, or the use of cannibalism, would curse an entire race. That they were all responsible for this terrible misdeed that was occurring here.
Now, I know in recent movies, the past 20 years or so, it seems to be male and females. But when you look back at the older literature, it always seems to be only males. Or am I incorrect in this?
No, you're absolutely correct. That is really a poignant opinion you have there, because when we deal with the realm of vampires, very early on, they were almost always predominantly female. So I think that what we're talking about here is the way in which these archetypes victimize the humanity. Werewolves are very in your face. They're very masculine, and whenever we think of vampires, they kind of like slink in under the door at night, right? There's a bit of seduction that goes on with them. They're just not going to go there and rip you to pieces. There's a bit of for lack of a better word, there's a bit of foreplay that goes on with that, and that is very feminine, I think, in the mystique. So our great vampires, until we get up to Vlad Tepes, our great vampires, the great archetypical vampires, are almost always female.
That's really interesting. And I think also, who wrote Dracula? Bram Stoker. I believe before he wrote Dracula, vampires were very, very different. He came out with a brand new type of vampire when he wrote Dracula.
Right. So that's a great point. So whenever Bram Stoker has finally invented his Dracula at the turn of the 20th century, this would have been as bold as the glittering vampires in Twilight, because vampires, for the most part, were revenants. It was these corpses that kind of came back to life. They were still in the process of desiccation. They were still going through a process of falling apart. There was nothing really seductive about them whatsoever. They were, just, the undead. They were kind of ghostly even in appearance and aspects. So it wasn't until Bram Stoker comes around and says that, a vampire could take a form and turn other people into vampires as well too. And this is all part of that of the myth building and adding on to the archetypes, because any good archetype is going to evolve over succeeding generations. Each culture culture is going to change it a little bit, tweak it a little bit, but at its heart is still that kernel of what it originally was in its prehistorical phase.
Yeah, because when you look at Nosferatu and you look at Dracula, they're very much, they look differently, but when you, like you said, deep down in the core, they're pretty much the same.
Right. Oh, absolutely. Now, the cool thing about Nosferatu is whenever that was made, and that was made just a few years after the book Dracula came out, Bram Stoker, his family was still alive. His family still is alive, as a matter of fact. And they did not allow, through copyrights, they did not allow the word Dracula to be used. So they had to use Nosferatu. And they were able to follow the story fairly closely without really going into the point that they could be sued.
Yeah,
so what we have in there is a very classic look at an Eastern European creature known as the Strigoi. And if we would go back in time and talk to Vlad Tepes, the archetype for what we now think of in the Western world, at least for the Dracula, for the vampire, and where we get the name Dracula from, if we would talk to him about what he would believe a vampire would be, it would be the Strigoi. And that is a reanimated corpse that rises at night. And it's interesting because the Strigoi feeds off the living in a very different way. They either bite the person to drain blood by biting them between the eyes, or also biting them over the heart. The idea of biting somebody on the neck is made up by Bram Stoker, and this is part of the Victorian norms of the time as well too. Sex had to be something that was very quiet. That was something that was not paraded around. It was something that wasn't very public. No public displays of affection in the Victorian world. So if we talk about somebody draining blood from the neck, it's a very sensual, a very textual type of preying upon somebody, and we don't talk about that kind of stuff in Victorian era. So whenever his Dracula came out, that really turned the tables on people as well too. This was something out of nowhere. This was kind of in your face. But the vampires before Bram Stoker's Dracula were much more a lot less sensual and much more brutal in the way that they did drain the human's blood.
A lot more animalistic.
Much more animalistic, that's right. Now, also I want to point out, several years before Dracula came out, there was a French writer that came, Le Fanu was his name, that came out with Camellia, which was a female Dracula, a female vampire, I should say, keep on saying Dracula, a female vampire, and it was a tale based upon two women who were in love with each other. So talking about turning the Victorian norms upside down. Of course, this guy was French, and the French get away with a lot more than the Victorian English. But yeah, absolutely, we were confronting sexual mores here by putting this stuff out there, and it was very hidden and it was very cloaked. But in the end, that's what we were talking about. We were talking about this, the way people feel towards other people, the idea of taking advantage of other people in a relationship. There's a lot of things that go on here from a sociological aspect and from a psychological aspect than just the story that's written down on the page.
Sorry, I'm going to be editing
That's
that
okay.
part. I got to edit that part. Getting back to the werewolf part, I know you've heard of this one before. Werewolf syndrome, hypertrichosis, I believe is how you pronounce it, where there's actually people in the world who are being mistaken or have been mistaken for werewolves because they literally have hair covering their entire body, their faces and everything. And they do kind of look like what Hollywood would perceive as transforming into a werewolf. Do you think that this is where we get some of, because I think they're South American. There's a long line of families, a family line in South America, I think, that really are affected with this, both males and females. I don't know if there's any others around the world, but do you think that this is also where some of the werewolf legend came from, seeing these people?
Absolutely, and let's talk about this. Let's actually explore this a little bit longer because I wrote a book entitled "On Dogman: Tracking the
Yeah.
Werewolf Through History,"
Hmm.
and I did have a chapter on this in my book because I think it's essential to talk about.
Hmm.
So the people that you're talking about are actually from Mexico, and
Ah,
they have turned into circus performers. They're making a
yep.
great deal of money off of it. It's not like they're being subjugated or made fun of or anything like that. They're actually very talented circus performers, although I think they might be getting more and more out of the business. But absolutely, hypertrichosis is definitely a very real syndrome in which people grow an abundance of hair over their body to the point they are completely covered in
Hmm.
black hair. Now, these people, we know that these people have existed throughout history because we know in the Renaissance, in the Canary Islands, there was a gentleman who was well, I guess captured is the wrong word, but whenever we talk about colonization, I guess the only word that we could use would be captured. Whatever the case may be, he was taken away from his home and brought back to England into the royal courts, and kind of as a curiosity piece, kind of something to fill in the menagerie with something very unique, something that people didn't have. But what's so interesting about this case is this is probably where the genesis for Beauty and the Beast came from. He
Ah.
was, of course, admired at court, and he actually caught the eye of a lady who he and she actually married, and they produced offspring. I think they had 8 children. 4 of them actually had hypertrichosis passed down to them.
Hmm.
What is interesting about the 4 children that had hypertrichosis is that these children were taken from this couple and handed out to various other families who were part of the royal court, almost as if they were puppies, almost as if you had a litter of puppies and you started to give them
Ah,
away.
that's
But
adorable.
yes, so we do know in history that people afflicted with hypertrichosis were out there, and what people thought of them whenever they did encounter them. They were considered beasts, they were considered curiosities. Now, this is one of my theories. If you would go back in time especially to the Greek world,
Hmm.
and you would say, I would like to find a dogman. I would like to find something that resembled a werewolf. So they have a great word for dogmen back in the Greek word, and that's cynocephala. That's dog headed. And on maps in the ancient Greek world, we would find places that had cynocephalists. We would find them in certain places, like faraway places like India. So it's my conclusion, through studying various reports, that this cynocephala probably was some sort of genetic disease, maybe hypertrichosis, maybe something akin to it, or slightly different from it. But whatever the case may be, it was something akin to hypertrichosis, and it's very possible that places around the world would banish these folk because they were so unlike the community at large. And it's very possible that these isolated communities of people that were suffering from this particular type of disease gave rise to the werewolf legends. I mean, think about this for a second. They would only be seen on the outskirts of town, where you probably wouldn't have any dealings with them whatsoever. People out hunting or whatever might come across one every now and then. But that is a great way to assume that the werewolf legend really kind of built up momentum, if you would think about it. I think that's a great way to assume that a lot of this werewolf romanticism, if you will, came about. It was through these places where people were exiled to, and they were dealing with these problems, and people would see them every now and then. And in a pre-scientific community, what else could you call them but wolfmen?
Hmm. And after they've been shunned, of course you're going to have a lot of, well, a wild humans out there. So they're going to be not necessarily friendly because they're wild. They're feral.
Sure, sure. And I'm not, yeah, I mean, it's very possible they may have even started their own communities that had some civilization to it as well, too. The Greeks loved to expose children. That's a classic term for if a child was born with some sort of defect, the parent did not want to feel guilty for murder. So what they would do is they would take the child out and expose them to the elements. They would take them out into the woods and just leave them. Now, it was the will of the gods whether the child lived or died. The parent could really shrug off any kind of guilt because it was the gods that were killing them, not the parent themselves. Yep. They were leaving them to nature. If the gods wanted them to live, they would live. And we know from Sophocles and Oedipus that Oedipus was exposed to the elements and he was taken in by a kindly shepherd. So we do know that people were exposed to the elements. Children were left that were unwanted or deemed to be some sort of abnormality to them physically. And we do know that people would take them in. And it's very possible that this is what happened, that a child with hypertrichosis was left out, abandoned, and somebody came upon the child, had pity, took the child in, and if this would happen through succession, if this would happen a few times, because we have to understand that if a family is producing hypertrichosis, it will be passed down to the offspring, other offspring. So you think about this: if a family has 5 children, 6 children, whatever, and half of those children are born with hypertrichosis, those children are going to be exposed. But if somebody's taking them in, it's very possible that soon you will have a society in and of itself of hair-covered human beings out there that are living on the outskirts of town. And in my opinion, especially when we talk about Arcadia, whenever we talked about the King Lycaon there in the first real werewolf, it's very possible that in these kind of backwater places, this is where the werewolf legend really took hold, because there was these groups or these last vestiges of people that were exposed that were able to come together in their own groups to form some sort of civilization away from other people because they were deemed unworthy to be part of civilized society.
Now, I remember seeing photos of families with this syndrome, I think it is, the werewolf syndrome, and it's really neat to see them with the Elizabethan collars, it's just like, I was dumbfounded when I first saw the photos, but I've never seen photos of babies. Do you happen to know if someone has this affliction, are the babies also covered in hair? I've never seen photos.
Yeah, they are. Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. So you can Google it. Yeah, you can see that. So people, have elected, you can shave your body as well too, but it quickly grows back. So the idea of transformation is very inherent in these legends as well too. So if you want to fit in, you can definitely shave your body or whatever, but it's gonna grow back very, very quickly. So it does seem as if somebody is transforming.
Ah, makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So when I look at werewolves and Loup Garou, for example, the difference that I understand is werewolves do not keep their intelligence, but Loup Garou do. Can you kind of explain the difference between the two? Because I always thought that was the main difference between the two.
Yeah, you know what? I have looked at, because the Rougarou has always fascinated me. The Loup Garou, the Rougarou.
Yep.
We have the Rougarou here in Louisiana area. That is part of the Cajun influence that was brought down from Canada, as a matter of fact. So there's So there's these different types of aspects to them, but here. In the United States, the Loup Garou, the Rougarou, is still a very bestial creature as well too, but it seems to be able to identify with people as well too. So it doesn't give over completely its human reason. Yes, I do agree with you on that aspect, but the terrifying thing about this is, though, even if you give up just a little bit of your human reason, you become something that we don't want to be. We become fully animal that we cannot control. And the other thing that's so nightmarish about this as well, too, is that you often don't remember what you've done as well. So you're out there committing these heinous crimes against nature, and then you wake up and it's as if you are innocent of what happened, but your body had transformed, so you are guilty through that as well too. So that's a terrible thing to go through as well too, to actually be sane in one state and then to be guilty and insane in another. And I think that's the other thing that we are overlooking in this werewolf legends as well too, is the idea of sanity and insanity. And I think that probably comes a part of these legends as well too, of the Loup Garou and the Roup Garou and all these other creatures as well.
Kind of, it makes me think also of Jekyll and Hyde.
Oh, sure, absolutely. The idea that a person can become something other than he wants to be. We could talk about ancient instances of schizophrenia that were called into play regarding, werewolf legends. And we do know, actually, that a lot of these werewolf legends did come from people with mental illnesses. If you would look at woodcuts in the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, almost always, 95% of the time when we're talking about werewolves, we do not see a person in these artistic illustrations as transformed into animals. We don't see them as werewolves. We see them in clothing that is ripped. We see them with disheveled hair. We see them in the guise of what we would call the mentally insane. This was kind of like the iconographic way to portray somebody that had mental health issues. They were unkempt. They were not properly dressed. And sometimes they would be wandering around on all fours as well, too. So like I said, about 95% of all artistic representations of the werewolf is simply a human down on all fours, still in clothes, although they're ripped and shattered and shredded and everything like that, and their hair is all wild and everything. But that is to show that they do not have a full capacity of their faculties.
Where does the Dogman enter? Because to me, that seems like a relatively new cryptid. Do you know when was the first time that Dogman was mentioned?
Yeah, the word Dogman actually comes, and don't quote me on this, but I think it's like in the 1950s or 1960s that we first have it. It was part of a radio spoof up in Michigan, but because it was coined at that particular time does not mean that the legends of a dog man creature was not in existence. Whenever lumberjacks went up to the great woods of northern Michigan, they reported seeing upright walking wolves up there. Some people even reported being attacked by packs of wolves that were walking on two legs. So the tradition is very, very ancient. Well, I mean, as far as the white man, by very, very ancient, I mean a couple hundred years. But if we go back and look at the Native American, the First Nations belief in these creatures, it goes back thousands of years. In the Ohio River Valley here, we had what we would call a werewolf cult, or at least a cult of the wolf, in around Kentucky, in around Tennessee. In the Ohio Valley, you would have these Indian nations that would seek to take the deceased and make them into what would appear to be a werewolf, or at least some sort of wolf-like creature. It would go so far that after the person was dead, that some of these cultures would actually remove the lower jaw of the human in order to put a wolf muzzle on it. So they would be taking parts of a wolf skeleton and putting it onto the human to make it seem as if that human was going through some sort of transformation. So we know that in the Ohio Valley we have this tradition in certain tribes where the human being that were after they were deceased posthumously, the human skeleton was configured in such a way that they were seeking to make the person appear to be some sort of combination between a wolf and a man. We know that sometimes they would even remove the lower jaw of the human skeleton and put the skeleton of a wolf over their face so that the person would appear to be in a transformation type of process. They would also take furs and wrap the body in fur. So if you would come across these burial mounds and find the interred therein, you would find an amalgamation between a human being and a wolf, which is great because whenever we look at places like Land Between the Lakes on the border of Kentucky and Tennessee, there's great werewolf or great Dogman traditions down there that are occurring even today. And this is not far away from where one of these burial mounds was discovered with the body of a person that had appendages of a wolf added to it.
I didn't know that part. That's interesting.
Yes, yeah, and we also know that in the Native American tradition that dogmen have always been tutelary spirits. These are protective spirits, and they're often associated with burial mounds. And if you look at the Beast of Bray Road up there in Michigan, that is an area right there around a lot of different burial mounds. And some of the first reports of the Dogman were before the Dogman came into existence, before that word became coined. A lot of reports have been of people seeing a very large wolf-like creature around burial mounds.
Oh, that's interesting. And they're bipedal, correct?
Not always. Sometimes they were quadrupedal. But the other interesting thing about this as well, too, is if we would go back to ancient Egypt.
I was just going to mention that.
And we see it. Yeah, see, there we go, Kat.
Yep.
And their funerary, their philosophy and their cosmology, part of their death ritual too was their version of the Dogman, which was Anubis.
Yep. Yeah, some people firmly some people firmly believe that Anubis is actually a race that was not originally from Earth. I've heard this several times, that for whatever reason they made it to Earth, crash landed, I don't know, and that's where the werewolf and the Dogman and Anubis, that this is where they come from.
It's very possible, but we do have a few artistic representation, excuse me, of Anubis in the form of a man, without being a wolf. So we do know that there was a transformation process to the god of Anubis, from man to animal and animal back to man. So again, as I said, when we're connecting the dots, we're going back 5,000-6,000 years to ancient Egypt. And then we can connect the dots the whole way up to, 1,000 years ago in North America. I mean, what's going on? And again, think of the aspects and the similarity of this. Both of these creatures are appearing as a dog, man type creature, werewolf type of creature, and they are associated with the deceased. I mean, that is a lot if you would think about it. There's a lot of stuff going on there.
This is just so fascinating to me. It just is.
Oh, it is. It's fascinating to me as well too. Now, some anthropologists have theorized that what happens in Egypt is whenever you bury the dead, that the animals will come down and start, preying upon the carrion, scavenging off the dead bodies. And one of these scavengers would be the wolf that would come out, or the jackal that would come down. And it's been theorized that what would then happen within the human psyche is you do not want to believe that your loved one is being eaten, its remains are being eaten. So it might be better in the human psyche to believe that that animal is a god that is now transporting the loved one to the afterlife. That's something to think about. And if that is the case, that is probably what happened in the Indian burial mounds as well too. This is a predation of predators that would come down to feed off the bodies, and they were deified because people didn't want to believe that that's what was occurring. It could be something as simple as that. It indeed could be. But there's also this aspect where these were seen as protective spirits who were the psychopompas, which are the conveyors of the souls of the dead to the afterlife. That's another aspect that is found in both Egyptian cultures and in North American cultures as well.
Because when you look at the ancient Egypts, when you look at their hieroglyphics, they have so many part man, part animal. Hippos and cats and so many different varieties of what we could potentially consider maybe a shapeshifter from this day. I don't know.
Sure, a shapeshifter. I mean, look, there's a lot of different ways we can look at it.
Yep.
The personification of, the human and the animal together, both having attributes of the same. But there's so much that goes on with the character of Anubis. There's so much that goes on there because it is so intrinsically tied to the death ritual,
Mm-hmm.
and it is like he acts as a priest, so it's a very human type of element there as well too. But I just think it's a fascinating thing whenever we look at the character of Anubis.
Yeah, so incredibly fascinating. I've always been extremely in love with ancient Egypt. Even have a big tattoo of Bastet.
Right.
Cat goddess, yeah, with the three pyramids that I will be adding to it eventually, and I will be adding Anubis to it as well. But there's just something. Ever since I was a young girl and we went to the library, for the school library and saw books on ancient civilizations and saw, I don't know, the Egyptians called to me for some reason. I was just so fascinated by that ancient civilization more than the others. And it's just kind of grown over time.
No, I agree with you 100%. I think the first time we start having our wanderlust, the first time we want to become little Indiana Joneses, even before we know who Indiana Jones is,
Yeah.
is by looking at the pyramids. Alexander the Great said, even time fears the pyramids. It's the only part of the seven wonders of the ancient world that are still there, and there's something that is so miraculous whenever we look at the pyramids. This is like the first very great building project in which humanity says we are here to stay, even more so than Stonehenge. These are structures whose base is, over an acre large, that rises up some 380 feet in the air, that they were lined, or they were actually faced in marble. So the entire thing would shine in the sun, so you would be able to see them miles and miles away. And this is an interesting thing, too. Up until the Eiffel Tower was built, the Great Pyramid at Cheops was still the largest structure in the world.
I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah, true story. So we have to think about that, how much, intellect that went on to this, and how far advanced these people were. I'm not one of these guys that talk so much about, ancient civilizations and all these kind of conspiracies, but I will tell you this. Undoubtedly, and this is talking from an anthropological point of view, undoubtedly, there was knowledge that we had in the past that we no longer have, that has either been forgotten or hasn't been retained or has been lost or whatever. But we definitely have a knowledge base that has been forgotten for whatever reason.
Yeah, because when you look at the Mayans too, their temples were pyramid-like. You have similar structures, and how would they have been able to convey that? It's not like this day and age where in like 2 minutes you can find something from that happened across the planet. It just fascinates me. Just like with the paranormal, it doesn't matter. I've said this countless times. It doesn't matter on the culture, the religion, or whatever. Everybody seems to have the same. There's Bigfoot throughout the planet, but they're all called different things, Yeti or,
Sure.
It's just, so when you have these structures that are very similar around the planet as well, it's just so incredibly fascinating.
Right. Well, that's what links us as human beings. These archetypes, these monsters, make us very human. They need us as much as we need them. I've said that many, many times. We give them life, and they also give us life as well, too. They put us in our place. But it also goes to show you how similar we are, that we fear the same things, that we hope for the same things, that we endeavor to reach for the stars, no matter where we are. This says a lot. This says volumes about the human spirit and who we are, and how similar we are. Even though we are 5,000 years removed from the ancient Egypts, we're still reaching for the stars, and we're still hoping to comprehend things out there that lie beyond us. The other thing about this thing, and I think that we could kind of like really, connect this very this particular thought to pre-scientific communities. Everything would have been the paranormal. And when we talk about the Egyptians, and we talk about the Mayans, we're talking about the Native Americans, or we're talking about really any culture around the world, they are hoping to at least coincide with the paranormal, not overcome it, not really so much to even understand it, just to understand, just to accept that it's there, and then try to deal with it. And I think that that's what really is going on. This is the reason why we have the Great Pyramids built, and this is the reason why we have these great burial mounds built throughout throughout North America, or Newgrange in Ireland. This is all our hopes of dealing with something that is so far beyond us that we can never completely comprehend, but we can at least attempt it, and we can try.
It's pretty deep, my friend.
Well, sometimes you got to think deep whenever the waters that we're treading is going to be deep anyways. Anytime you step out, I mean, I think with the farther you get along in this field, the less it becomes tree knocks and whoops and things like that. And it becomes much more academic. It becomes much more complicated, if you would. It's just not about looking for footprints and hair samples. It's about going deep into humanity and thinking about why these things are out there. And I've said this before as well, too. I find the wilderness that exists in the gray matter of the human mind just as fascinating as the wood and the thickets out there and around the world where people are traipsing around looking for these creatures as well.
Agreed. Yeah.
No, I'm pretty well. Look, I personally think that this was a great discussion. This was a great conversation. Two people chilling, talking about werewolves and vampires and things that go bump in the night. What more could you ask for?
I know, and then all of a sudden you go into Mayans and Egyptians, and love it.
Yeah, because they remember we talked about. You had said earlier that Bigfoot exists throughout the world. Yep. The idea of the wild man exists around the world, but they all go by different names. They go by, but they're still part of the same phenomenon. They're still part of the same element that we're all looking for now. We're on the trail of Bigfoot or whatever. Yep. But it still links us. It links us to the distant past, and it also links us to the future as well too. Because until these things are, scientifically identified and classified, there's always going to be people out there wondering whenever they look into the deep woods what lives in there.
Yep. I'm very, very hopeful that we will find more answers and actually see these creatures, because there was not that long ago, I think it's a silverback gorilla, that they thought was just legend, and here we are. We know that they exist. So,
right, the mountain gorilla, absolutely. Yeah, the mountain gorilla was not known until relatively recently. The Komodo dragon wasn't known until I think the 1920s.
Yeah. So
it's possible. There's still hope. There's still hope.
If that's all that we have, I'll take the hope.
But I will tell you something. There's the romantic in me that always hopes that they'll be on the periphery, and never pinned down on a scientific table. There's always a part of me that hopes that in that sheer wildness, because remember, once one of these things are categorized or cataloged, there is no longer that wildness left. These are the personifications and the poster children of all those wild places that we have not been conquered yet. And I hope that stays wild for a little bit longer.
Same. I'd like to be able to have the proof, but we all know that they're going to be hunted and experimented on, and I really don't want that for any creature.
That's right. That's right. That's right. I want to be able to go out there on some midnight in the middle of the summer, whenever the moon is full, and howl along with my dogmen brethren, and hear the Bigfoot knocking on trees, whooping around in their mock at who we think that we are.
Yes. Makes me wonder though if they're watching us and saying to each other, "These silly humans."
Yeah, these silly humans. You can see why we stay away from them, kids.
Yeah, yeah. Or like
Yeah.
so many people say that aliens probably just close their windows in their spaceships and just fly past
That's
Earth
right.
as quickly as they can.
Lock their doors and
Yeah.
lock the windows. That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah, I think that we are, like I said. I love people. I truly do. I just am so enamored by humanity as it is. But there's so much about us that's so frustrating as well too,
Hmm.
and that's what gets me as well too. So I like to look for monsters because I don't want to keep on seeing monsters every time I turn on the news.
Yes. Yeah, we are supposedly civilized, but we still do have those animalistic instincts in us that are deep, deep,
Oh,
deep. So, yeah.
that's right. They're deeply rooted, but they're still there.
Yeah.
And I guess, as they say, whenever the wolfbane blooms, the moon is full and bright, those aspects can come out. Even though we are unaware of that, of the capacity for that to happen.
And I do know people that are affected by the full moon. I jokingly tell them that, yeah, it's the werewolf in you. It's crazy.
It's still.
It really
That's
is.
right. That's right.
It's crazy.
Yeah, ask a police officer, ask somebody that
Yes.
works in the an ER. They'll absolutely tell you that is the truth.
Yep. Well, my friend, we have been at this for about an hour. So before we
I
sign,
had a blast.
as did I always do. Like, I can't even believe an hour went by. It's just a
I
blink of an
want
eye.
one part. Yeah, I asked you. I said, we had a little bit of a technical issue here,
Yep.
and I said, how long have we been doing this? Because it seemed like we just started,
I
and
know.
here, almost a whole hour.
Yep. It's amazing. Well, that's what happens when you have a good conversation.
That's right. That's right. That's what happens whenever you have a good conversation in our living room while people are
Yep.
sitting around drinking crack and spiced rum or whatever.
Spiced rum, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, before we sign off, would you like to tell listeners where they can find you and your very interesting books?
Sure, I can tell you. I will tell you this: that my On Vampires book has been picked up by Walmart, so now you can get it
No
at
way.
Walmart.
How cool is
Yes,
that?
yes. I'm
Probably
pretty
not in
happy
Canada,
about
though,
that.
eh?
Yes. Yeah, and my on aquatic monsters of the Great Lakes has also been picked up by Walmart. So those are two
Nice.
books that you can pick up at Walmart.
I wonder if they have that in Walmart up here in Canada.
I don't know. You should go try. And now
Yeah.
I will tell you this: they're probably not at every single Walmart. I mean, I know
Yeah.
you can order them online
Mhm.
through Walmart.com. But yeah, it's still kind of cool to think they're at Walmart. But if you don't want to go out to your friendly neighborhood Walmart and look for my book or order my book, you can always do it on Amazon, where everything for any occasion can be found. So I'm on Amazon as well too. So either Walmart or Amazon, and yeah, that's how you do it.
And as usual, I'll be adding the links to the show notes so you can just go to Amazon and order as many books as you want.
You are awesome, and we had talked about this before, and I would like your listeners to know as well too that hopefully in the near future, but definitely hoping in the near future that we can have a conference together where we can
Yes.
actually sit down and talk about these things in a very academic setting. So you don't have to be dressed in camouflage, wearing an adventurer's hat. We can actually come down and sit down at a nice table in a library or in a college setting and discuss the true nature of these things that we fear, these things that we call monsters and cryptids.
Yes, I've been in contact with a local college here, and I'm just trying to wait and see what the COVID situation is going to be because right now they're only allowing certain like people that have to be on campus. So a conference would not be possible right now. So if not at the end
Sure.
of this year, I'm hoping next year in 2023. I'm hoping.
Uh,
Ugh,
Absolutely. Yep. I will be there with,
Awesome.
as they say, with bells on.
With
I
bells
cannot
on,
wait.
yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
So as soon as everything opens up, I will let you know, and let all you wonderful listeners know that if ever you wanted to come to the Ottawa Valley for that conference, right now it's just in my head. I just have some ideas, but I plan on making this a reality, and it'll be great to sit down with you, Ron, and talk about things that we talk about on virtual living room.
I cannot wait. I'm looking forward to it, Kat.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ron. I really appreciate you being here again, and I hope 2022 will be a good year for you.
And I am so happy and pleased that I was your first guest of 2022.
Thank you. Take care.
I hope people like it.
Oh, I'm sure they will. Take care.
All right. I cannot wait.
Well, we've made it to the end of another episode. Thanks so much for listening. Until next time, take care of each other. And if you'd like to be on the show or have questions and comments, just drop me an email, paranormalheart13@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you.
Paranormal Heart would like to extend a special thank you to PurplePlanet.com for supplying the music for the show. The views and opinions expressed on Paranormal Heart are those of the host and participants.